What's up, everyone? Well, about 2 years ago, I repotted this tree, which is the logo tree for the Bonsai Society of San Francisco. It has a pretty long history, and ever since then, I've had it in my yard, trying to get it to grow a little bit faster and having some success, but not a lot. So today, I'm going to do a little bit of light cleanup to this and talk about some more of the history and what needs to happen in order to keep this tree healthy and moving in the right direction. Let me give it a spin here. It's in a somewhat non-traditional but very nice old container. And this is actually, the tree is actually part of the Bonsai Garden Lake Merritt collection now. It was donated from the Bonsai Society of San Francisco to that collection about 15 years ago. And it's been in my care mostly because the the interference of COVID with people moving trees around between various places kind of landed it in my lap. And so over the past, I don't know, 10 years or so, it hasn't changed too much. It used to be much more of a cascade, and now it's almost a semi-cascade, but it had a much longer cascade tail on it. But it's an old San Jose trunk that has been grafted with kishu or shimpaku, whatever you want to call it. The grafts were done a very long time ago, and it's been the logo tree for the Bonsai Society of San Francisco for at least 40 years, I think. And the logo often tends to be updated, or the society updates the logo to match the current state of the tree. That hasn't actually been done in a while, but it's still kind of interesting. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through here and kind of pick off dangling foliage, and I'm also going to show you guys how to thin this without slowing down the growth of the tree, because at this point I want the tree to grow faster than it's growing right now. And so like last year and this year, it's only putting out sort of this even spurts of growth, and I shouldn't say spurts, but just like a 1/4 inch worth of growth in every tip over the course of a year, regardless of how much fertilizer I give it and all of the other conditions being right. Now, it's not super hot here in San Francisco, so this is actually pretty typical of mature kishu foliage in this environment. But I think the other thing that's happening here is basically that the tree has been trimmed incorrectly for a number of years. And so let me see if I can demonstrate to you guys the difference between how I think you should be trimming a tree that's this old and refined versus the mistakes that you can make. So the key thing here is that I want to remove a lot of this foliage, but I want to keep the parts that are the strongest. And on kishu, it's kind of interesting. You can see that the tips that are a little bit fatter, a little bit bigger, tend to be the ones that are stronger. So I'm going to pull off a lot of these like little bits that are on the bottom here and kind of on the inside that are weak. And you know, I had my teacher try to convince me that by pulling off this old foliage, you're actually reducing the stress on the plant. Like in other words, this foliage is not returning as much energy as it's taking to maintain, and it's not going to grow because it's too shaded, this stuff back in here. So by removing it, you are actually stimulating more growth in the tree. I'm not 100% convinced that that is true, but the way that this is a really good example here. You can kind of see that it's been cut previously here. In other words, when the branch was growing, this cut was made in order to slow it down. And by doing that, you really do slow down the tree, and that's not the way that I like to maintain my junipers. So I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna remove foliage. I'm not really styling the tree. This is just sort of a maintenance thing. And, you know, removing more foliage allows better distribution of light through the winter. It allows the plant to look a little bit less like a bush and more like a bonsai. But my goals here are really just to, I'm thinking mostly about the health of the plant, not so much about the design. And so the design being secondary, I'm not trying to contain any of these tips. I'm not trying to look at like, do I have the silhouette that I want? I'm really just trying to look at the individual pieces of foliage and decide, is this piece of foliage most likely benefiting the tree, or is it impeding the growth of the tree? So anything that's shaded or kind of weak looking, I'll pull off with my fingers or scissor it off if it's a little bit bigger. And hopefully that will give us better light distribution and actually stimulate more growth. And I'll have to report back on whether or not I'm successful in terms of the better growth, but we'll see. All right, so I've done some of the top here, and I'm gonna continue cleaning up some of this and this section just to kind of demonstrate to you guys. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean up these bottom lines, but I'm also gonna go in here and pull off bits that are part of clumps that are below there and use those as a method for thinning out foliage. So what I'm trying to do again is to remove weak foliage, which is foliage that's been shaded out by other growth. As part of this process, I'm not just trying to remove interior growth. That's not really going to benefit me in the long run, because that removes the possibility of easily cutting back to other branches. But what I am doing is I'm removing the interior growth that is weaker or shaded out in favor of growth that's about the same length, but that has been getting more sun because of its position. And so this piece probably is not going to be as useful as the other two pieces that are coming off the same junction. So you can see that it starts to create these lines on the bottoms of the pads, which makes the tree look a lot cleaner. But I'm going to go a little bit further than this, so I'm going to keep going on this whole section. All right, well, that's at least an hour, maybe an hour and a half of thinning. And I've gotten it so that there's a lot more light. You can actually see the inside of the tree rather than just like a big green ball, but I'm not done. And it's interesting because the foliage seems to be just kind of getting to the point where this tree could be wired to really benefit the design. This back branch, or actually both of these back branches, are a little bit on the weak side, so they don't look too great, but most of the front and the top look pretty good. I'm going to continue thinning a little bit up here, particularly on the back of the top, and then I will turn my attention to cleaning off some of the algae here, as well as doing a top scraping to ensure that there's good air penetration into the root ball over the winter. All right, one of the things that I've noticed while I've been working on this is that there's a fair amount of minute cypress scale that has gotten established on here. And the reason I can tell is that on my work table here, I see all these like little teeny dots. Those are basically either the dead shell of cypress scale, or potentially even live ones that I've been knocking off as I have been working with the tree. So I'm going to go ahead and spray it with a soap spray, and potentially also treat it with systemic insecticide to ensure that I knock these guys back. They're, in my neck of the woods, very difficult to be completely rid of because the cypress trees, Monterey cypress trees in the neighborhood, have them, and so I just get sort of repopulated even if I kill all of them. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't keep them off of the tree as much as possible. All right, I'm going to remove these BioGold pellets so that I can kind of clean up the surface of the soil without discarding them. We're actually selling BioGold on the Bonsaify website now. If you want to pick some up, it's a surprisingly, well, maybe not surprisingly, but it is a very good bonsai fertilizer. And I think that the single thing that got me really going on it was that I was trying to use less expensive bonsai fertilizer, and I kept having rodents basically take it off of the soil, which does absolutely no good. So it's not really cheaper if it's not doing any good for the plant. And so finally decided to give BioGold a try, and ended up so far very happy. No rodent activity, and good growth on the trees after just a couple of months of using it. Of course, it's not the only thing I do, but it's definitely not hurting. All right, using the vacuum just to quickly get it out of there, I removed most of the topsoil and organic matter residue that's on the top here. So I'm down to a few roots, and I am going to, before I replace the soil and put back some fertilizer, looks like I might need to vacuum up here in the crown a little bit too, but I'm going to spray this trunk with a little bit of rubbing alcohol in order to get rid of the algae that's on the bark. Now, there's a lot of ways you can do this, but this is one of the kind of fastest and easiest ones. It doesn't involve removing any of the bark, and it doesn't involve anything that will actually damage the foliage of the tree. But I should say, if you're going to do it, make sure that you don't have moss on the tree that you want to keep, because that will kill the moss as well. Okay, so the alcohol doesn't do anything instantaneously. After it evaporates, it usually, I don't know, it takes about a day or something like that to really notice the difference. So I'm gonna go ahead and just use this wire brush to take off some of the stuff that's on the deadwood, and then I'm gonna, I think, call it a day on this tree. Switching to a wire brush on a Foredom. So just a light touch with that wire wheel, and if you allow dirt and lichen and moss to build up on the deadwood, you're just going to encourage it to hold more water there and then eventually start rotting. So keeping the deadwood clean, whether or not you actually treat it with lime sulfur, which I could do now by wetting it and applying the lime sulfur, but whether or not you do that, just cleaning off the deadwood to ensure that it doesn't have moss growing on it or lichen growing on it will help keep the tree from having rotten wood. And I'm going to re-top dress just with a Aoki shohin mix. I wouldn't use this much akadama in potting up a juniper if I was actually potting it, but on the surface here, it will retain a little bit of extra moisture, which makes the pot a little bit deeper, but the roots that are down below won't be sitting in a wet environment. All right, well, that's it for this time. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I always enjoy working on old trees like this that have a lot of history, just knowing the history of those trees. And I still need to give this a little drench of insecticide and then put it back out on the bench, and I'll probably add a little bit more fertilizer because here in the Bay Area we still have a few weeks left to go before the plants really stop growing, and actually junipers, because our temperatures are so mild, will go straight through the winter, so I leave a little bit of fertilizer on them. Thanks everyone for watching. See you next time.